It all started on what should have been a peaceful Saturday morning. My wife and I had decided to grab breakfast at a local cafe, not too fancy, just a quiet little spot we'd grown to love. My wife, 7 months pregnant, was glowing with happiness, and we were just enjoying the moment. We were standing in line, laughing about baby names, when everything changed in a matter of seconds. Out of nowhere, a woman cut right in front of us, like we were invisible. My wife, trying to stay calm, politely mentioned that we were next. That's when the woman, let's just call her Karen's, napped. She turned around, full of attitude, and started throwing insults like it was her full-time job. At first, we thought it was just someone having a bad day. But then she did something I still can't believe. Without warning, she grabbed her hot coffee and hurled it right at my wife's chest. The cup hit the ground, splashing coffee everywhere. My wife gasped, holding her belly, shocked and scared. The whole cafe went silent. People stared. Some pulled out their phones, and me. I was frozen for a second, but not for long. What this woman didn't know was that she had just assaulted a pregnant woman. In front of the district attorney. That's right, me. But here's the twist. I didn't blow up. I didn't yell. I knew exactly what to do. Because I've seen people like her before, muddled, reckless, and thinking they can get away with anything. What she had just done wasn't just rude, it was criminal. And I was about to make sure she faced the consequences legally. But before I could even reach for my phone, something happened that changed everything. And trust me, it wasn't what anyone expected. Stick around, because this story is just getting started. Before I could take a step forward, a man rushed up beside Karen. He looked just as irritated as she did, maybe even worse. He whispered something in her ear, and suddenly she tried to play it off like it was an accident. "Oh my gosh, I didn't mean to spill it," she said loud enough for the whole cafe to hear, even though everyone had just watched her launch that cup straight at my wife. My wife stood there trembling, one hand on her belly, trying to stay calm for the baby. I could see the shock in her eyes. She wasn't just scared, she was hurt, physically. Thankfully, the coffee hadn't burned her, but emotionally. She couldn't understand why a complete stranger would treat her like that. The barista behind the counter looked stunned. A few people in line were whispering, others just frozen in place. Nobody knew what to do. That's when Karen turned toward the crowd and said she bumped into me first, trying to twist the story. It was clear she thought if she spoke loud enough and acted confident, people would believe her version. Classic Karen move. What she didn't realize was that there were cameras in the cafe, 4 of them. In fact, and they caught everything. I knew we had the proof, but I also knew we had to play this smart. See, in my line of work, I've learned that people like her often dig their own holes. You just have to give them the rope. I gently guided my wife to a chair and asked the staff for some water. I kept my voice steady, but inside, I was boiling. Not because of the insult to me, but because someone thought it was okay to intimidate a pregnant woman in public. My job might be enforcing the law, but right now, I was just a husband trying to keep his wife safe. I still hadn't told Karen who I was. That little detail would come late at the right moment. But what happened next, even I didn't see coming, and it changed everything. As my wife sat quietly, still shaken, I scanned the cafe. People were pretending to mind their business, but you could feel the tension thick in the air. One woman in the corner gave me a sympathetic glance, while a young guy with headphones whispered, "I got it on video, man. I saw everything." He offered to send it to me, and I nodded, thanking him. I didn't want to start anything there. But now I had more than security footage, I had a witness. Meanwhile, Karen was pacing near the entrance, clearly trying to figure out how to make herself the victim. The man who had rushed to her side, her husband, maybe, was getting louder. talking about how people these days are too sensitive and how accidents happen. But no one was buying it. The mood had turned. You could tell the customers were quietly siding with us. Still, no one dared confront her directly. The cafe manager finally came out from the back, pulled aside one of the baristas, and started reviewing the camera footage. Karen must have noticed, because she suddenly became a lot more nervous. She walked up to me and, with the fakest smile I've ever seen, said, "Look, I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to cause a scene. Can we just forget this happened?" I didn't answer right away. I looked at my wife, who was still holding her stomach, trying to steady her breathing. I wanted to scream, to tell this woman exactly who she had messed with, but I stayed calm. The truth always speaks louder when you let it unfold the right way. That's when a police officer entered the cafe. Turns out, someone else had already called 911. Not me. Not my wife. Just a bystander who saw enough to know this wasn't something that should be ignored. Karen's face went pale. Her husband's tone shifted fast. Suddenly, he was all about misunderstandings and no need for trouble. It was too late for that. The officer asked what happened, and everyone looked at me. I stood up slowly, still not revealing who I was, and said, "I think we should take this step by step." The officer walked over, calm but alert, scanning the scene. My wife was sitting down, still clearly distressed. Karen stood with her arms crossed, trying to look innocent, while her husband kept talking over everyone, saying we were making a big deal out of nothing. The officer asked who was involved, and I pointed at Karen, then gently toward my wife. "She's the victim here," I said firmly. My voice was steady, but inside, my heart was pounding. Karen jumped in before I could say more. "Told you it was an accident." She bumped into me, and the coffee just spilled. "It's not a crime to spill coffee," she said with a laugh, trying to make it sound ridiculous. The officer didn't laugh. Instead, he turned to the cafe manager, who was still reviewing footage. "You have video of what happened?" he asked. The manager nodded. "Multiple angles," he said, before disappearing into the back again. Karen's confidence began too. Her husband muttered something under his breath, clearly annoyed that this wasn't going away. Meanwhile, a couple of customers started quietly approaching the officer, offering their version of the story. One woman said, "I saw her throw it. No bump, just anger." Another added, "She said something nasty before she did it. It was on purpose." I stayed quiet, letting it all unfold. I could feel Karen watching me closely now, maybe sensing I wasn't just some regular guy. I had a feeling she was trying to figure me out, maybe even panicking a little inside. The officer returned to me. "Would you like to press charges?" he asked calmly. I looked at my wife, her eyes met mine. She gave me the slightest nod out of revenge, but because she knew this wasn't something that should be brushed off. But before I could speak, Karen suddenly snapped. "This is ridiculous. You're all ganging up on me because she's pregnant." I barely touched her. Her voice cracked mid-sentence, and then she said something that changed everything loud enough for the whole room to hear. "That's what people like you do. You play victim and expect the world to bow down." The room went silent. I finally stood tall and said, "You really don't know who you're talking to, do you?" Karen froze. Her eyes narrowed as if she finally realized this wasn't going to blow over. "Who are you?" she asked, her tone shifting from smug to suspicious. I could tell she was trying to piece it together, why I hadn't raised my voice, why the officer was treating me with quiet deference, why people were listening when I spoke. But before I could answer, the cafe manager returned with a flash drive in hand. "We've got the footage," he told the officer. "It's clear as day." The officer took it and nodded, stepping outside to review it in his cruiser. That's when things took another unexpected turn. Karen's husband suddenly stepped forward, and in a low voice said, "Look, we can make this go away. No need to press charges. My wife just got out of a situation. She's been stressed." His eyes darted nervously. "I'm sure we can settle this quietly." I stared at him. That's when I noticed something off. He was gripping his phone. Tightly. Almost too tightly. And then I saw it. He wasn't texting. He was recording. He was trying to flip the story to create some twisted narrative that they were the victims. Maybe he thought if he got me emotional or caught a certain tone, he could use it later. Maybe post it online, spin the story. But I wasn't playing that game. I took a step back and said loud enough for everyone to hear, "This isn't going away." Not when you assault someone, especially a pregnant woman, and then lie about it. I turned toward the other customers. You all saw what happened. This isn't just a misunderstanding. This is exactly the kind of behavior that has consequences. That's when the officer returned. His face was stone cold. "I've reviewed the footage," he said. "We're going to need both of you." He pointed at Karen and her husband to come with me. Karen's face drained of color. What? He didn't even do anything. The officer paused. Actually, based on what I saw, he might be facing his own set of charges. And then, out of nowhere, Karen said something that shocked everyone. "He told me to do it."